Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My fabulous co-host is Laura Blackwell. I hope you're all healthy and safe and taking care of yourselves and your loved ones as we enter into a particularly difficult phase of the pandemic. So we're still shut in, most of us, locked down and looking for distraction, looking for amusement, maybe something a little bit more. So Story Hour really turns to the second oldest form of entertainment in human history, which is folks sitting around the fire telling lies to each other. So every week, we've got two authors, about 30 minutes each, doing exactly that. This week, we're really happy to have Kate Heartfield, and Premee Mohamed is returning. She first read with us in July, I believe. And by the way, all the authors out there, we really encourage not just first-time readers, but if you were here and you enjoy it, by all means, please reach out to us and set up another time. You don't need to have a publishing event or any other kind of event happening. Just you're welcome anytime. As is our custom, each week we offer a couple of brief PSAs suggested by the readers. And they're means for which you might help your communities if you're fortunate enough to be in a position to do that. So Kate is reading tonight for UNICEF. We all know about UNICEF. They work in over 190 countries and territories to save children's lives, to defend their rights, to help them fulfill their potential from early childhood on through adolescence. UNICEF.org. Premee is reading tonight for Zoe's Animal Rescue.org, which is a volunteer-run shelterless rescue in Edmonton, Alberta. And there's plenty of opportunities there. You can adopt a new family member, you can foster a dog or cat, you can volunteer, or you can just give money. So that's Zoe's Animal Rescue.org. So let's get to it. If you're here via Zoom, please mute your mic, but feel free to leave your camera on if you're so inclined. It's really nice for our readers to see folks. And feel free to use chat, kibitz a little bit. We like that too. Our Facebook Live friends, feel free to comment for legacy and posterity purposes, but of course, we can't interact with you in real time and we can't see you. So Premee Mohamed is an Indo-Caribbean scientist, science fiction and fantasy writer based in Edmonton, Alberta. She's also an associate editor at Escape Pod and was recently a Capital City Press featured writer for 2019 and 2020. Her debut novel, Beneath the Rising, is out now from Solaris Books. Her short fiction has appeared in many venues, including Analog, Pseudopod, Apparition Lit, and Augur magazine. And she can be found on Twitter and on Instagram at Premeesaurus. So take it away.
Thank you for the lovely intro. And thank you guys again for inviting me back. I had a lovely time the first time. Hope my volume's okay and everything. Or if someone let me know if it's suddenly not okay. This story was originally published in Lackington's in 2018. Kate's already smiling, she knows the story, for their Gothics issue. And it is called At the Hand of Every Beast. As it walked, the cathedral dropped strange detritus, torn hymnals in unreadable tongues, moldering surplices, broken candles whiter than teeth. Madness also it left in its wake, and a great black gouge across the tame fields of Nivernais, then Bourbonnais. The rich earth wept out its blood as if it had been slashed in a duel. When it passed into Auvergne, the rumbling awoke a small boy sleeping in a thatch hut at the edge of the woods. As he crawled out into the light, still rubbing his eyes, he cried out to see the monster bearing down upon his forest, advancing in silence save for the wrenching moan of the torn soil. For a moment he wondered whether he had gone mad or was dreaming, or both, whether he had had a dream, So terrible he had gone mad, a dream of this angular-shouldered beast of indeterminate size and age, but he recovered swiftly and rushed to climb a tree. From the safety of its branches, he watched in dismay as the crust of earth smothered his home. The cathedral flung forth buttresses and galleries before and behind itself, seizing and crushing trees, stones, animals. A unicorn bolted from the woods and into the thing's shadow, and screamed as it too was seized and destroyed, leaving no more than the splintered shards of its horn like pearl buttons. When the building seemed to be safely gone, and only bones and branches remained, the boy climbed carefully down and walked after it. He was dazed. He could not think of what else to do. He had never seen a monster before, and certainly not one composed of stained glass and dressed stone that grew taller even as he watched. Keeping his distance, he evaded its grasping limbs, and when it foundered briefly in a stream, he was able to climb a relatively immobile colonnade and enter the monster's body. Within, the uneven darkness was relieved by vivid patches of stained glass. The boy moved through these cautiously, as if they were stepping stones. A prodigious oculus in the eastern wall admitted the most light, compelling him to pause and examine it. Its scene appeared to be a nativity, though nothing resembling the one in his little local church. The Holy Mother's face was distorted with fear as she looked upon the manger in which lay a squirming nest of serpents, their mouths open to strike. Above them, rendered in lapis blue, the great star of Bethlehem burned not alone, but as one of a pair. Eyes, the boys realized as he recoiled. Half in tears, he stumbled on, details emerging as his eyes grew accustomed to the darkness. The arched ceiling, of impossible height, rose gracefully in a multiplicity of curves into a space where all light failed. Statues turned to watch as he tiptoed onwards, and froze again as a voice rang out. "Who are you? What business have you here?" This might have been the voice of God. The boy was not sure, and paused in the central aisle, wringing his hands in fear. "Hello?" he called back. "My name is Emile." "How come you to this place, child?" the voice cried, wild with despair. Emile crept down the aisle, and at last arrived at the altar, draped with bloodied furs and the broken antlers of stags and bulls. Behind it crouched an old man in a torn canvas robe who beckoned him near. "My home was destroyed by this thing," Emile said after a moment. "I thought I was dreaming." "And yourself, sir?" "My name is of no import," the man said, passing a hand over his weary face. "You may, I suppose, call me Monsieur Vauquelin, for that is the name of someone I knew once, long ago. You are no madder than I, boy, or we are mad then together." He rapped his knuckles on the altar in emphasis to show that both it and he were solid. The boy nodded politely, but before he could offer to help the old man down from this monstrosity, Monsieur Vauquelin began to speak again, eagerly, as if he had only been waiting for a living ear to hear his story, and had been telling it to the statues and the stones in the meantime. "I am the creator of this cathedral, though not its builder, for, as you have seen, it builds itself, day by day, village by village. I cannot count the dead behind us, nor can I soothe the cries of the mad who survive its footsteps and awaken buried in the earth. Yet not so long ago, I was merely a man, with a dream to create something beautiful and grand, as they do in the South and the West. The churches that touch the sky, that offer a semblance of praying hands to the eyes of God." "You have not," Emile replied, horrified. "How did this happen?" "Wait, only wait, be less impatient. Do not be like me. For I wish my cathedral to surpass all others, and more swiftly, not in 60 or 70 years, for I'm already old, and the old grow selfish, we forget how to prostrate ourselves before the living God. One night, I prayed to whomever could fulfill my wish. Whomever, do you understand? Come closer, boy, and listen. My plea was answered, but not by God. Instead arrived the one of whom we cannot speak, the one you learned about in church. Yes, I see from your face, you know him. The unfaithful, the cast down, he who lies. How many names we have given him over the years. Is that not a sign of love rather than hate? No, Emil whispered, but the old man galloped on. He promised me the greatest church ever built, ever witnessed, for all of time. Not merely my lifetime, not merely yours, but forever. I placed my name upon his parchment, and he used a knife to. Do you see here the scar upon my bosom, which is scarcely healed? Placed blood beside my name. The agreement he left with me here. You cannot read, can you? Never mind. Look at it. Behold the hand of the devil himself. The next morning, 2 stones appeared in my workyard. I thought I had dreamt it. I begged, I prayed, I declared the agreement void. I do not believe it can be, the boy ventured. The priest tells us that if you would sin in a dream, it is the same as in waking. And he is correct. I became entombed within this beautiful shell. No one responded to my cries for mercy save he himself. In my dreams, he laughs, weeps, dances, sings. He offers me a place in hell, tells me I will design his next palace in the great city of Pandemonium, and in my chamber, I will hear the screams of the damned. My new friend, my beloved friend, he tells me. I was not cast down for rebellion, did not revolt against your God, and not for pride either, but because I too greatly loved this world. I am no sinner. I am as pure a creature as yourself, and wish only to remake this world in the image of the holy paradise in which I was raised. Emil nodded, and, moved by a great pity, sat next to the old man, who now openly wept. Mr. Vogtlin, is there any way I may be of service? Let me at least help you to. No! No! Taken aback, Emil stared at the old man, wondering if the mark of the devil were upon him, and he too might have been corrupted. It might have been that if Emil were abandoned by God, no sign would be given, except for this thing, walking free upon the innocent earth. In these many days, no one has said such a thing, Monsieur Vauquelin murmured. No one dared to climb into the belly of the beast, nor dared to meet the maker of the beast. But you can't live here forever, Emil pressed him. This is not a home. No, it was not meant to be a home. This is my monument, my masterpiece, the bane and curse of my life and my family, should they ever find out. No one, in all the many millennia of the world, till the apocalypse and the second coming, will ever create such a grand and glorious thing. My name will go down in history. You will destroy all of France. Perhaps this thing is the beast of which John of Patmos spoke, and it will cause the apocalypse itself. Let it then. Nothing in the world is so beautiful and worthy a thing as this cathedral. My wish has been granted 1,000-fold over. A great church, boy, speaks not merely of how esteemed man holds God, but also the honor of its parish, the skills of sculptors, stonemasons, scaffolders, glassmen, weavers, dyers, carpenters. Like a magnificent book, it captures the history of man's love for beauty and majesty. To fling it aside would dishonor such knowledge, would lose it forever. Perhaps later, even wise men will not be able to read it, but now all may do so, even the simple, who know every word merely by gazing upon it. You say the devil's sin was not pride, Emil burst out, but you have said also he is the prince of lies. His sin was certainly pride, and so is yours, for esteeming this thing above the people it's destroyed. You are too young to speak of pride, the old man said testily. You know nothing of it yet. An urchin living in the woods like an animal. Unschooled, unlearned, you have not traveled to the other cathedrals, seen them reaching for God like beseeching hands, a cry to the heavens. You have not whispered in their depths, seeking mercy. No, Emil said. But if even I, who you say is so unlearned, can see it, then it is clear to you all that your vanity has rendered you unfeeling. Your name may go down in history, but as a villain and a monster. But still it will go down, the old man cried, and stubbornly clung to the altar. Beneath his powerful, wrinkled hands, the hard white stone shifted and blossomed into carven designs, skulls and cruel faces, laughing with upraised claws and long fangs. The woman's head sprouted, her tongue lasciviously lolling. Emil cringed as the stone creaked far above them in the strain of growth. It does not reach for God, he said, hands over his ears. It wishes to reach past him. See what you have done? I have done what no one else could, the old man shouted. Before Emile could reply, the floor tilted, heaved, and slid them from behind the altar, fetching them up against the statue's base. A roar emerged from the entrance, where chips of stone rained upon the stained glass and rebounded with soft thuds, as if it were flesh. Emile ran down the aisle, staggering and weaving as if drunk, and raised himself to a windowsill to look. He knew not how far the cathedral had walked, and recognized nothing of the village far below him. But its denizens were screaming and rushing for cover, cutting the tethers of their horses and unyoking their oxen so they too could run from the oncoming monster. The bridge over their tiny stream was crushed into powder, sending shards and dust up so high that Emile coughed and tears streamed down. For the briefest moment he spotted a church, a tiny one of planks and thatch, before it vanished under the monster. In the upturned earth appeared the relentless rain of candles, Bibles, chalices, all ejected from some unseen place on the monster's corpus and dooming to madness any survivors. Emile cried for them to touch nothing, to take only their children and go, but knew he could not be heard. When the village was consumed entirely, and the cathedral crept silently over the fields again, he walked back to the altar. He was confused and sorrowful rather than angry, for it had been truly astonishing to witness, and for the blink of an eye, as the greater church consumed the smaller, he had glimpsed the old man's heart, filled with joy at having created something so powerful and so strange. For this cathedral was not like unicorns or basilisks or dragons, which littered the countryside like stones. This was the only one of its kind in the entire world, and surely would ever be. But he remembered once more the faces of the villagers below, and his own little house, and he stooped next to Monsieur Vauquelin again. "This is no monument to your greatness, sir," he said gravely. "It is a monument to yourself. You will fall no less far than the angel of light and into the same place. This thing must be destroyed." "It cannot be, I tell you, and it must not be. You speak madness." "Like the word of God?" Emile said bitterly. "Like dealing with the devil? That is a madness upon which we all agree, but the mad who are left behind by this thing do not. We must do something. We must try." When the old man fell silent and hid his face with a bloodied fold of hide, Emile growled in frustration, walked away, and set to work. Newly fed, the cathedral heaved and birthed fresh horrors as he prowled about seeking for weaknesses. The wooden chairs that lined the nave righted themselves and transformed into bones, their seats the flared moths of pelvises perversely welcoming. On the western wall, a long and beautifully rendered Stations of the Cross flaked from the stone in great sheets, revealing Christ and his disciples as demons and cockatrices and wolves, the Blessed Virgin as a sea monster with gaping mouth, Mary Magdalene as something so terrible that Emile could no longer bear to look. Pontius Pilate became a satyr beside her, and danced and gestured with a spear between his legs, dripping holy blood and rich oils. Emile hurried away from the quivering mural and wrenched at one of the chairs till a tremendous bone came loose, perhaps a leg bone, but not human. From the Nephilim, he thought grimly, or another monster from the Bible. With this bludgeon, he began to batter all he could see, striking statues, faces, stained glass, lit candles, tapestries, paintings, crucifixes, hymnals. Upon the floor, the candles melted at once into greenish wax, flickering with low flames that refused to consume parchment or cloth. Worse yet, his efforts at desecration seemed to inflame the monstrous thing. It strove ever more rapidly across the landscape, light flickering through the windows. The interlaced ribs of the beautiful ceiling became snakes of stone, writhing and glaring at him with eyes of green gems. Emile stopped, panting, and glared back at the cathedral as it twisted with pleasure. Despondent, he returned to the altar, which had doubled in size and was far too tall for any priest to reach behind. "Well, perhaps your pride has won the day," he said to Monsieur Vauquelin. "The thing cannot be defeated from within." "No, As man cannot be defeated from within, the old man muttered, withdrawing his head from the ragged hides. But if what, monsieur? To pray, to burn, to beat, these all have no effect, he said, and stood, taking the boy's shoulder for balance. But what if it could be propelled from the top of a mountain? Surely nothing could survive that, whether infernal or no. Or into a lake, a river? Emile blinked, hope returning to his heart. Do you think so? You've changed your mind, then? You do not know it, boy, the old man said sadly. There's blood upon your face, and it is not your own. How many have died under this thing? While I prayed and wept, I have been cruel, more than cruel. You are right that I am a villain and a monster. I am unworthy of God's assistance. Therefore, we must help ourselves. Yes, Emile said. Oh, but how? The high must be brought low, announced Monsieur Vauquelin, and together they reached the entrance of the cathedral and looked cautiously upon the swaying landscape below. Trees creaked and snapped, fragmenting the air with sap. Screams echoed from unseen animals or people. Not a moment to lose, the old man said. We must think. Where are we? Emile wondered. I no longer know, but there, look. Would that mountain not fit our purposes very well? Emile was not sure, but he nodded and chewed his lip, clinging to the windowsill as the cathedral swayed through the forest. How might they induce the thing to turn, though, let alone climb? Perhaps, he said, one of us can run out in front of it, like a hare before the fox. It cannot move so very fast through these trees and will slow yet further once it reaches the slope. My boy, sighed Monsieur Vauquelin. I am too old to climb down. Can you not see how my legs tremble? Then I will go, Emile said, uncertainly, and perhaps it will work. You are young, the old man said, seizing his arm. Your whole life awaits. You might perish in the attempt, and no one might ever come in here again. But as you say, you cannot climb down, Emile said. Unless we can think of something else, I must try. Did David not defeat Goliath, despite his youth and size? So they say, the old man said, but there was sadness in his voice, and he watched anxiously as Emile took his leave, carefully descended from a side door, plunging into the thick leaves of the forest and disappearing from view. It was difficult to orient himself once inside the dense trees, within which, Emile thought, no axe had ever swung. The bushes and thorns of the undergrowth were tangled and thick, and constantly falling near him as the cathedral tore them from their roots. Perspiring and frightened, he repeatedly leapt aside to evade these obstacles, till at last he reached a clearing and was able to race ahead of the monster, hoping it would turn. And turn it did, by mere inches at first, but at the end of perhaps 2 leagues, it was unmistakably following Emile. He kept up a fast trot, searching frantically for a way up the mountain chosen by the old man. In fact, it was not truly a mountain, he realized, heart-sinking, but a mere hill, and the slope would surely not be enough to topple the cathedral. But he ran on, breathing deep, clutching his side, and when he reached the hillside, he dropped to his hands and knees and began to climb like a goat. He prayed as he went for what little good he now believed it would do. The great building creaked and groaned in pursuit, spilling over its false idols, its sickly sweet-scented candles. As he could not read, he did not fear looking at the dropped books and parchments, scribed with their ominous writing, but he still swept them away when the wind carried them up the slope. Oh God, you are there. Hear me, he begged, hearing the buttresses biting into the slope close behind him. Help me vanquish this abomination from your world, even if it was once your will. Surely you cannot intend for your children to suffer so. Surely you cannot watch us die at its feet. But no voice thundered from the heavens, no bush burned, no ass spoke. The devil, too, did not appear to protect his creation. Emile scrambled and jumped, the monster so close behind him that his bare feet were struck by the clods of earth thrown up by its grasping limbs. It seemed 1,000 years before he reached the summit. He threw himself flat upon the thin turf and bare stone, gasping for air. He had outpaced for a moment or two the monster, but as it began to draw level with his face, cornice here, a gargoyle there, turrets and slates, tails and wings, He rolled away and began exhaustedly to jog to the far side of the hill. The old man called his name, his voice small and feeble, but Emil dared not pause to listen. If he could just reach the other side of the hill, he thought, the cathedral might stumble down the slope. It was quite steep on the far side, he could see it already. The land below was beautiful, bright in spring russets and greens, the morning's mist burned away by a clear sun, the fields untouched by that terrifying dark gouge into the earth that led to this spot. Never had he been so high, nor so far from home. But already the farmers below had spotted the points of the thing slicing the sky and were shouting in alarm. Monsieur, Emil called over his shoulder. Can you climb down? No, boy. But run, and keep running, the end is near. Then jump, Emil cried, and turned, just dodging a great heap of flying masonry. There is still time. There will be time in hell, the old man said, his last words, as the cathedral crested the hill, paused for a moment, blocking out the sun, then began to sag. By inches, in reverse, the thin soil crumbling under its weight. At last, a great slab of the hill gave way, and the entire structure plummeted into the valley, as slowly as a falling feather. Did God witness that too? Emil wondered. The way he saw the death of every sparrow? Would he rejoice, mourn? For it had all been in his name, had it not? Monsieur, Emil called tentatively after the dust settled, and the last slates had musically fallen from the heap of rubble and ruin. A tapestry flapped in the damp breeze. Monsieur Vauquelin, are you there? But there was only silence and the slow beginnings of birdsong. Perhaps, Emil thought as he sadly descended, it had sounded the same after the fall of the angel of light. Perhaps God could not speak for the depth of his grief, or his shame that he had created such a thing to speak. His name evermore in glory. They had all failed, all. Glory remained only in those left behind. The end.
Wow, thank you. That was lovely.
Chills.
Yeah, yeah.
Goosebumps all up and down my arms.
You guys. Okay, I will mute and I look forward to Kate's reading.
Right. I always have to take a breath between authors every week. So here's my breath. Thank you, Premee. And Kate, welcome. Kate Heartfield writes science fiction and fantasy, including the Aurora-winning novel Armed in Her Fashion and the Nebula shortlisted novella Alice Payne Arrives, along with dozens of stories. She's the author of The Road to Canterbury and The Magician's Workshop, both of which were shortlisted for the Nebula in Game Writing. Her next novel is The Embroidered Book, a historical fantasy coming out in 2021. A former journalist, Kate lives in Ottawa. Take it away, Kate. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful. Thanks so much to both of our hosts and for all of you for coming. This is really great. It's particularly special for Premee and me because every author has to have that one reading where nobody shows up. And Premee and I had one at a convention. We shared our one reading where nobody showed up before. So this is like full circle. Now we've finally been able to read together. So this is wonderful. So I'm going to read off my screen. So if anything goes wrong, please yell at me because I might not see if you're gesturing wildly as I'm reading. I'm going to read a story that appeared in the new Decameron project this year, which is a wonderful project that came out as soon as the pandemic hit, of various stories that were linked together in a frame narrative by Joe Walton, and I was so happy to participate in that project. And this story, I had been working on it for a little while, but I'd never really had an excuse to finish it. And so this project gave me an excuse to finish it, which worked out really nicely because it's sort of an homage to The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton, which turned 100 this year. So it felt fitting that I finally finished this story in 2020, 100 years after that book was written. So those of you who know The Age of Innocence may recognize a little bit in here, but it's a totally different story, just set in New York in the 19th century with magic, and make it gay, because why not? So this is in a hansom cab at the Liberty Street ferry terminal. The message arrived as a bunch of gardenias with no card. Eliza Paget, at 29 years old, was somewhat suspicious of gardenias, their petals so loosely furled, so impossibly pale. Her mother said they were a very showy flower, even when they weren't saying anything at all. The arrangement that arrived at the Paget brownstone on a morning in early June of 1875 had something unmistakable to say. It conveyed an invitation, in its pattern of dark green petals and nodding white heads, all the work of an unnamed flower mage. It requested that Eliza Paget be at the Liberty Street ferry terminal the next morning at 11 o'clock. One of the petals had fallen onto the table, and Eliza picked it up between thumb and forefinger and held it for a long time, thinking. Several facts disturbed mother and daughter that night, as their spoons clicked in their oyster soup, and two trains rattled along parallel tracks in their minds. Liberty Street was far from Washington Square, and therefore the business was of the kind that needed to be kept, as it were, sub rosa. Whatever was to be discussed was not to be seen or heard by anyone of their circles. The fact that it was a magical message meant, of course, that it was quite safe for Eliza to go. It meant it came from one of the families that managed the use of magic in respectable ways, and almost certainly the Whitethorns, who were the most skilled with flowers. A family with a tendency to produce prodigal sons with romantic ideas, but which had, as a consequence, developed formidable methods for cutting off avenues of escape. Escape was the word Eliza used as she thought it over, though she reflected, with a sardonic setting down of her spoon, that her mother would certainly not. All of that together led to the inescapable conclusion that the invitation to the Liberty Street ferry terminal must have something to do with the Benjamin Brock affair. Benjamin Brock was one of the more promising of the Whitethorn grandchildren on the distaff side, despite the fact that his father came from an obscure family that did some vague sort of magic with ribbons, or was it place settings? Eliza, who had a little Whitethorn blood herself, had danced with him at her coming-out ball. For the last few years, he had been the subject of mutterings among the old people, as he had passed the age at which he ought to have married and gone into business, even the business of ribbons or place settings, if that was where his talents lay. Instead, he had traveled a good deal more than necessary, and had developed regrettable interests. And so some member of the Whitethorn family had summoned Eliza for an out-of-the-way meeting. Which Whitethorn? Eliza hoped it would be Maud, who was her own age and whom she liked a great deal, but it could easily be one of the older generation. It was inevitable that the family should have intervened at some point. Eliza allowed herself a private sigh over it as the Paget brougham rumbled down Broadway with her alone inside it. She was not unsympathetic to Benjamin's desires. She knew well enough the restlessness of youth, although her own dreams were insubstantial, formless and unnamed, as she had not had the benefit of travel. Mamma's health would not allow it, and so had to be contented with looking out of windows. But when one was born into one of the old magical families, one had certain responsibilities. It couldn't be helped. It was not tragic. She would not use that word for the almost pleasant pressure that held them all upright like the laces of a well-designed corset. It did sometimes exert a little twinge, though, like a melancholy note. Life should have melancholy notes, Eliza told herself, to make it beautiful. As the carriage turned into Liberty Street, Eliza took out her stylographic pen, filled with ink created to her own personal formula, and slid a card out of a silver case. She wrote the date on the card, the ink flowing purple as a bruise. one corner. As she stepped out of the carriage and into the bright morning, the driver took the card from her with a nod. The moment she was ready to return, the corner of the card would unfold itself, signaling the driver to come. The road in front of the ferry terminal was full of carriages and noise and the smell of rotten fruit. Eliza shaded her eyes and looked upward at the giant clock that adorned the pediment over the terminal doors. It was 3 minutes to 11. The tops of the terminal buildings were all pointed like the tops of tents, and behind them rose the rigging of ships festooned with flags, creating a carnival atmosphere. Over Eliza's head ran the telegraph wires, and suddenly the scene seemed less like a carnival and more like a puppet theater. And who are the marionettes, she wondered. She had heard of wire magic. None of the old families would have anything to do with it, but the rumors suggested that was what Benjamin Brock wanted to do with his life, to work magic with strings of copper and clicks of sound. Mama called it mechanical, which was a close cousin to vulgar. Eliza knew nothing about it and couldn't think why the Whitethorn family should have summoned her, unless it was perhaps her connection to the family through a great aunt. But then most of the families were connected one way or another. Perhaps it was only that they wanted both the Paget and Whitethorn families to bear some of the responsibility for what was to be done with Benjamin Brock and for keeping it quiet. Eliza, an unmarried Paget woman without children or in-laws, was more free than most to take care of unpleasant matters. She was unentangled. Eliza took a few steps, dodging horse droppings, wondering where the meeting was to take place. She hoped they didn't intend to summon her onto a ferry, and from there onto a train. She smelled gardenias. The scent dampened the warmer human smells of the street like ice rhyming a river. It drew her forward, questing toward the source. Before too long, she was standing at the step of an ordinary hansom cab, one in a line of them, all angled on the side of the street nearest the terminal doors. It was empty, save a single gardenia blossom on one side of the two-person seat. The driver seemed to take no notice of her, so she stepped up into the cab, and then suddenly there was no gardenia flower on the seat, but there was a woman. Maud Whitethorn, dressed in white, with a single gardenia pinned into the blonde hair, braided and looped around the back of her head, smiled and extended her hand. "I'm sorry about the hole and corner business," Maud said, and gestured that Eliza should sit beside her. "We are invisible and inaudible to others while we remain inside this cab. The driver will not take any custom, but either. He's in a sort of dream of his own." Eliza nodded, a little exhilarated to know they were quite private, despite the open front of the two-seater cab, the twitching tail of the horse, the people walking briskly in and out of the terminal. They kissed each other's cheeks a little awkwardly as they were already sitting beside each other. Eliza was relieved that the smell of gardenia had faded into the background, that she could smell Maud's own subtler scents. "How are you, Maud?" Eliza tried and failed to keep the alto rumble of significance out of her voice. She didn't want to sound like one of the old ladies of the family. Maud, a year younger than Eliza, had broken off an engagement a few months before. "I'm perfectly well, and you're a dear to ask. You must come and see me sometime, and we'll have a long talk. Anything I can do to help you, I will do with my whole heart." Eliza meant it as an opening to the business of the day, and Maud understood. "You must know by now, everyone knows by now, that my cousin Benjamin has taken to dabbling with wire magic. My family has decided to make it impossible for him to continue." A shiver ran through Eliza's shoulders, and she pulled her lace shawl around her. Maud was speaking of a curse. Flower magic could enact powerful, unbreakable curses, which was one reason the Whitethorn family preserved jealous control over that magic. "I do have a little Whitethorn blood, but I should make it clear I have no talent for flowers," Eliza said. Despite her mamma's frequent pronouncement that blood will out, magic had nothing to do with family in any biological sense. One of the most accomplished architectural mages of the Vanelstein family was adopted. It was all in the training, and Eliza had been trained as a Paget. She knew how to use calling card magic to convey information that could not be spoken. She could not send a bouquet that would make someone's heart leap or turn to stone. She certainly could not send a rose that would deliver a curse with it. Maud smiled gently. "I will manage the curse myself." Eliza was impressed to hear Maud say the word outright. How refreshing she was, and how sensitive. Her face was sad as she spoke the words, and then she turned her face to look out of the cab window, away from Eliza. Maud should not have been put in this position. Eliza realized it would be uncomfortable if Maud should turn back and catch her gazing at her face in profile, so she let her gaze drop to give Maud a moment, and then she was looking at the impossible curve of Maud's upright waist within white taffeta, so close that Eliza could reach out and touch that curve just there, but it occurred to her, with a prison door clang, that she never could. If Eliza had been a man, she might have danced with Maud and rested one palm on her back, and then, perhaps, if they had danced out into a conservatory or into a quiet corner behind a screen, Eliza might have let that hand drop, might have curled her fingers about that waist, might have pulled Maud toward her. It was a silly fancy, and they were too old now to twirl around together practicing their steps as they had when they were children. Eliza looked down and the things they could never do, while Maud turned back to her. Eliza's face was hot, and her voice had distant thunder in it. It's a shame that the older people can't recognize in a new age that the unfamiliar sorts of magic will not disappear simply because we turn our faces away from them, Eliza said. I wonder if there might have been another way. I have been searching for that other way, Maud replied gently. She rested her white-gloved hand on Eliza's brown-gloved hand, and the tips of Maud's fingers nearly grazed the organza of Eliza's skirt. I have been. The difficulty is that wire magic cannot be controlled in the old ways. It travels by its nature. It is inherently wild. If we were to give New York's families control over it, and that would happen if they gave Benjamin their blessing, because every blessing is control, isn't it, with our families? If we did that, Eliza, nothing would ever be the same ever again, not only for us, but for the world. So many things could go wrong, my dear Eliza, but your heart does you credit. The warmth of Maud's hand was suddenly unbearable, and Eliza withdrew her own to pull a lash away from the corner of her eye. You can be sure the Paget family will back the Whitethorns, Eliza said, businesslike. Of course. I suppose I make a good co-conspirator, as I have so little to lose. Eliza could see out of the corner of her eye that Maud cocked her head as she looked at her. Will you forgive me if I am direct? Eliza smiled at that. I would forgive you anything, Maud. Then may I ask why you have not married? She took a breath, in and out, focused on the people walking back and forth as if on a stage, unaware of the audience of two within the cab. Mama needs someone to look after her, and my brother was the one who married. Anyway, I've never had a suitor I wish to accept. At that, she looked at Maud with a sly smile. Certain things may be impossible, but certain other things are not. Sometimes people do stumble and are caught getting out of cabs, Eliza thought. On leave-taking, it would be right for her to kiss Maud's cheek again. Some things were possible. Well, let me assure you, I chose you for co-conspirator entirely because you are the most gifted calling card mage I know. I will manage the curse, as I said. I'm not cursing Benjamin himself. You need not look so horrified. I'm magic, making sure that if he attempts it, certain safeguards will come into place. I can manage all of this myself. And the calling cards? Eliza stopped, suddenly understanding. You need to control what everyone else knows about it. Maud nodded. You've always been so clever, Eliza. Eliza nearly winced, but then she realized that Maud, unlike Mama, didn't mean it as a complaint. Maud continued, all the older people will need to know is that it has been taken care of. Everyone must know that Benjamin is back in the fold, that we trust him entirely, and they must all stop seeking details about it. We want very much for the gossip to stop, you see. I know you'll make it very clear to everyone that the matter has been resolved. Eliza nodded. Calling cards could be tailored to their recipient and were more precise, if less. Some family members would expect to know more details than others could be told. This was something she could do to help Maud to keep the families from tearing Benjamin apart. In time, he would come to accept whatever restrictions Maud put on him, unless... She looked at Maud, startled, and saw the crinkles at the corners of her eyes, saw the possibility of no curse at all, of a conspiracy within a conspiracy, of something that neither of them would speak aloud, not yet, not when they had not opened enough space to say it in. Benjamin is clever too, Eliza said, almost a whisper. Benjamin is very clever, Maud agreed, but the old people are distraught and must be satisfied. Eliza nodded. She could already see how all of the cards should be addressed and folded, the new printings that she would order with borders of a certain design, the lavender water, the angle of cards and salvers all over the city, the subtle and precise magic that would teach a dozen sprawling families what they needed to know without anyone speaking a word, and then it would be over, and a new chapter would open in New York society, a page with new scandals and new delights to be written upon it, a blank constrained at its edges, but with room nonetheless within it, configurations of the old familiar alphabet that might, perhaps, open up the world like a letter unfolding in a lover's hands. Did you mean it, Maud? What, dear? When you asked me to come and see you. I've never meant anything more. Then I promise to come, and I shall give you my card, so that you may hold me to it, Eliza said. She pulled her pen and her card case out of her reticule, and with a hand that shook only a little, she wrote on it something she had never written before, a certain combination of innocent signs, a blot here, a flourish there, a certain crease near one edge, all of it conveying particular information to Maud alone. A calling card might be read by anyone, but it could only be fully understood by the person of the mage's choosing. Maud took the card, not looking at it, but looking at Eliza instead, and rubbed it a little between her gloved finger and thumb as though testing the nature of it. Eliza put her case and pen back into her reticule and closed it brusquely. You'll know when it's all done. Our business, I mean, she said. I will leave a card about it, and then... They did not embrace on parting as they had on meeting, after all. And Eliza did not stumble. She stepped out of the hansom cab and saw that her carriage was approaching, the horses' feet adding to the clatter and hum all around her. As she walked across the busy road, the conversation clung to her, all the things she might have said. It was a familiar feeling for Eliza, but this time she wrapped the unspoken around her, let it warm her like her shawl. She looked up at the wires overhead, cutting passageways out of blue sky, and felt a moment of vertigo. The air crackled with impossibility. Thank you very much. That is the end of the story.
Thank you.
I love language of flowers and stories. Turning them into spells is even better.
All right. Well, once again, this happens every week. I'm not quite able to process consciously how these two readings are connected, but they do seem to be kind of coupled in some sort of subterranean manner. So this has never failed to happen, not once, since we've been doing Story Hour for about 7 or 8 months now. So thank you both for a pair of really fantastic stories. And thank you all out there for coming to another week of Story Hour. We are really glad that you're here. We're really glad that we're here. Next week, we've got Tonya R. Moore and a returning author, Tom Marcinko, one of my old partners in crime from Clarion West, Logies many years ago. So good night, everybody. Stay safe and have a happy Thanksgiving. And we'll see you next time. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
everyone.
Thanks.